My son Tyler stood in my kitchen holding my checkbook and said the words that made my blood run cold. "Your paycheck goes to my wife now." I looked up from the pot of collard greens I was stirring on the stove. The steam rose between us like a wall I couldn't see through. My wooden spoon dripped onto the linoleum floor my late husband Wallace had installed 43 years ago, back when Tyler was just a baby learning to walk across these same squares. "Excuse me?" I said, my voice steady even though my hands started shaking. Tyler stepped closer, and that's when I noticed his wife Jessica standing behind him in my doorway. She had her arms crossed and a smile on her face that didn't reach her eyes. She was wearing a designer purse I knew cost more than my monthly Social Security check, and her nails were freshly done in that bright red color that always looked like warning signs to me. "You heard me, Mama." Tyler set my checkbook down on the kitchen counter with a heavy thud. "Jessica and I have been talking, and we've decided it's time for you to contribute to this family properly. You're sitting on all this money while we're struggling to make ends meet." "Struggling?" The word came out sharp. I turned off the stove and faced them both. "Boy, you drive a Mercedes. Jessica posts pictures every week from fancy restaurants and nail salons. What exactly are you struggling with?" Jessica's smile got tighter. "Mrs. Eleanor, you just don't understand how expensive it is to maintain a certain lifestyle. We have appearances to keep up. Tyler's reputation in his business requires you to take money from his 70-year-old mother?" I wiped my hands on my apron, the one Wallace bought me from that little shop on our 20th anniversary. The fabric was worn thin now, but I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Before we continue, please drop a comment if you've ever experienced something like this. We'd love to hear your story, and subscribe to the channel to help us grow. Tyler's face got hard in a way that reminded me of his teenage years when he didn't get what he wanted. But he was 50 now, not 15, and the cruelty in his eyes was something new, something that frightened me. "It's not taking, Mama. It's family. Dad's military pension comes every month and you get your Social Security. That's over $6,000 you're just hoarding while your own son has to scrape by." "Scrape by?" My voice rose despite my best efforts to stay calm. "Tyler, your father worked 30 years in the military. He survived 2 tours in Vietnam. He earned that pension with his blood and sweat and nightmares he never could shake. That money was for us, for our retirement, for—" my voice broke. "For the life we were supposed to have together." Wallace had been gone only 8 months. The grief still sat on my chest like a stone every morning when I woke up in our bed alone. Some nights I still reached across the sheets, forgetting he wasn't there anymore. "Well, he's gone now." Jessica's voice cut through my thoughts like a knife through butter. "And you don't need all that money living here by yourself in this old house. It's time to be realistic, Mrs. Eleanor. You're getting older. You might need care soon. We're actually doing you a favor by managing your finances now before you can't manage them yourself." The audacity of it took my breath away. I had to grip the counter to steady myself. "Get out of my house." "Our house," Tyler corrected. He pulled out a folded paper from his jacket pocket and laid it on the counter next to my checkbook. "Dad left the house to me in his will. I've been nice about letting you stay here, but maybe that needs to change too." My heart hammered in my chest. That's a lie. Wallace and I owned this house together. When he passed, it became mine. We went over all the paperwork with the lawyer. "Did you?" Jessica tilted her head like she was talking to a confused child. "Or did you just think you understood what the lawyer said? You've been getting forgetful lately, haven't you, Mrs. Eleanor? Sometimes you call Tyler by his father's name. Sometimes you leave the stove on." "I have never—" "Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, Tyler interrupted. "We're going to the bank together. You're going to set up an automatic transfer so that Dad's pension and your Social Security get deposited into an account that Jessica and I control. We'll give you an allowance for your expenses, a reasonable amount." "I will do no such thing." Tyler's expression turned cold. So cold it made me think of winter mornings when the house was freezing and Wallace would get up early to start the heat so I could wake up warm. Tyler used to be such a sweet boy. He used to climb into our bed on Sunday mornings and we'd all cuddle together while the sun came up. When did he become this stranger standing in my kitchen? "You'll do it, Mama, or I'll have you declared incompetent. I'll tell the court you can't manage your own affairs, that you're a danger to yourself. I've already talked to a lawyer." He tapped the paper on the counter. "All I need is a doctor to sign off that you're experiencing memory problems, and I know Dr. Harrison owes me a favor." The room spun a little. Dr. Harrison was Tyler's college roommate. They played golf together every month. "You would do that to your own mother?" "I'm trying to help you, Mama. Why can't you see that?" Tyler's voice took on a wounded tone that might have fooled someone who didn't know him. But I saw the calculation in his eyes. 10 o'clock tomorrow. First National Bank. Be ready, or Jessica and I will have to take more serious steps. They left my kitchen smelling like Jessica's expensive perfume and Tyler's cologne that cost more than my monthly grocery bill. I heard their Mercedes start up in my driveway and pull away, and only then did I let myself sink into one of my kitchen chairs. My hands were still shaking. I looked around my kitchen at the yellow curtains I'd sewn myself, at the pictures of Tyler through the years stuck to the refrigerator with magnets, at the ceramic rooster Wallace bought me at a flea market because he knew I collected them. 47 years of life in this house. 47 years of memories soaked into these walls. And my son wanted to take it all away. I closed my eyes and thought about Wallace. We met at a church social in 1972. He was 22, fresh back from Vietnam with shadows in his eyes and a smile that he only showed to people he trusted. I was 20, working as a secretary and singing in the choir. He said later that he fell in love with my voice first, the way I could make Amazing Grace sound like a promise instead of just a song. We got married 6 months later. People said we were too young, too fast. But they didn't understand. When you find someone who sees you, really sees you, you don't waste time. Tyler was born 2 years later. Wallace was so proud. He held that baby boy like he was holding the whole world in his arms. "We're going to give him everything, Eleanor," Wallace whispered to me in the hospital. "Everything we didn't have. He's going to know he's loved every single day of his life." We did love him. Maybe too much. Maybe we protected him from struggle so well that he never learned to appreciate what he had. The phone rang and startled me out of my memories. I looked at the caller ID and saw it was my friend Doris from church. "Eleanor, baby, you okay?" Doris's voice was warm and concerned. "I just had the strangest feeling I needed to check on you." That's when I started crying. Big, gulping sobs that I'd been holding back since Tyler walked out. I told Doris everything. The demands, the threats, the awful smugness on Jessica's face. "That boy has lost his mind," Doris said when I finished. "You listen to me, Eleanor. Don't you go to that bank alone tomorrow. I'm picking you up at 9:30, and we're going to talk to Pastor Williams first. Wallace was a decorated veteran and a deacon of our church for 25 years. The community doesn't forget that. Tyler needs to be reminded who his mother is and where he comes from." That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up at 2 a.m. and went to Wallace's study, the small room where he used to sit and read his military history books and write letters to his old service buddies. Everything was exactly how he left it. I couldn't bring myself to change anything. I sat in his chair and breathed in the faint smell of his aftershave that still clung to the fabric. Then I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. A small, locked drawer in his desk. Wallace had shown me the key years ago, told me it was in his sock drawer if I ever needed it, but I'd never had a reason to look. Now, I did. I found the key and opened the drawer with trembling fingers. Inside was a leather folder. When I opened it, I found documents, bank statements from an account I didn't recognize, a letter from an attorney's office addressed to Wallace, dated just 3 months before he died, and a photograph, old and faded, of Wallace in his military uniform standing next to a man I didn't recognize. My heart started pounding as I read the letter. It was about a trust, a substantial trust set up through Wallace's military benefits and some investments he'd made over the years. The letter mentioned something about protective measures and financial abuse protocols, and a name, Raymond Chen, manager, First National Bank. The same bank Tyler was demanding I go to tomorrow. I read through the documents twice, then 3 times, my mind racing. Wallace had set something up, some kind of protection. But what exactly? And why hadn't he told me about it? Then I found another note in Wallace's handwriting, paper-clipped to the bank statements. Eleanor, if you're reading this, then something's happened to me and someone's trying to hurt you financially. Trust Raymond Chen. He knows the signal. 3 taps on your wedding ring against any hard surface when you're with him. He'll know what to do. I love you forever. Your strength was always greater than you knew. Do you? 3 taps. I looked down at my wedding ring, the simple gold band Wallace had slipped on my finger 50 years ago. My hands were shaking so hard the ring caught the lamplight and sent little reflections dancing across the walls. Wallace had known. Somehow, he'd known that someone might try to take advantage of me after he was gone, and he'd set up a safety net, but there was more in that drawer. I pulled out another envelope and opened it with cold, numb fingers. Inside were copies of checks, my checks, made out to cash and signed with my signature. Except I hadn't written them. 5 checks, $10,000 each, all cashed within the last 6 months. $50,000 stolen from my account, and I'd never noticed because I'd been so lost in grief that I barely looked at my bank statements. I just knew there was enough to cover my bills, enough to buy groceries, enough to keep living. The signatures were good, really good, but they weren't mine. I could see the tiny differences in how the E curved, how the R connected to the O in Eleanor. Tyler. It had to be Tyler. He had access to my house. He'd come by so many times in the months after Wallace died, saying he was checking on me, bringing Jessica to help organize things. How many times had he been alone in my office where I kept my checkbook? The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 3 in the morning. I sat in Wallace's chair holding evidence of my son's theft and a secret plan my husband had put in place to protect me, and I felt something shift inside my chest. The grief that had been weighing me down for 8 months started to transform into something else. Something hotter and harder. Anger. Tyler thought I was weak. He thought I was some confused old woman he could manipulate and steal from. He thought wrong. I gathered all the documents and put them in my purse. Then I went to my bedroom and pulled out the dress I wore to Wallace's funeral, a strong navy blue with pearl buttons. I laid it out for the morning. At 9:30 the next day, Doris pulled up in her Buick. She took one look at me in my funeral dress and nodded approvingly. "You look ready for war, sister." "I am," I said. But before we went to the bank, Doris drove me to Mount Zion Baptist Church. It was Wednesday morning, and Pastor Williams was in his office preparing for Bible study that evening. When I showed him the forged checks and told him about Tyler's demands, his face went through shock, anger, and then settled into a grim determination I'd only seen a few times before. "Eleanor, you are not alone in this," Pastor Williams said. He picked up his phone and started making calls. Within 30 minutes, 6 members of the church council were gathered in the meeting room. These were people who'd known Wallace and me for decades. People who'd watched Tyler grow up in Sunday school and youth group. Deacon Brown, who'd served in Vietnam with Wallace, looked at the forged checks and his jaw clenched so tight I could hear his teeth grind. "This is theft, plain and simple. That boy is stealing from his mother." "And trying to gaslight her into thinking she's incompetent," Sister Margaret added. She was 82 and sharper than people half her age. "That's elder abuse, financial exploitation. There are laws against this." "We need to go to the police," someone said. Pastor Williams held up his hand. We will. But first, Eleanor has an appointment at the bank, and I think we should all accompany her to that appointment. Tyler needs to understand that Eleanor is not alone, that this community stands with her. So that's how I walked into First National Bank at 10 o'clock on that Thursday morning, dressed in my navy funeral dress, flanked by Doris on one side and Pastor Williams on the other, with 4 more church members walking behind us like an honor guard. Tyler was already there, looking impatient. Jessica was with him, checking her phone. They both looked up when we walked in, and I watched Tyler's face go from annoyed to confused to angry in about 3 seconds. "Mama, I said just you. Why are all these people here?" "Mrs. Eleanor has community support," Pastor Williams said calmly. "She wanted witnesses to this transaction." "Witnesses to... This is a private family matter." Tyler's voice rose, and several other bank customers turned to look. "Is it?" I asked. My voice came out stronger than I expected. "Is it a private family matter when you're trying to steal your dead father's pension? When you've already stolen $50,000 from my account using forged checks?" Tyler's face went white, then red. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." I opened my purse and pulled out the copies of the forged checks. "These are copies. I have the originals in a safe place. My signature, Tyler. Except I never wrote these checks. You did." Jessica grabbed Tyler's arm. "We should go." "No, I think you should stay," said a voice behind us. I turned and saw a dignified-looking Asian man in a perfectly tailored suit walking toward us. His name tag read, Raymond Chen, Bank Manager. "Mrs. Eleanor Washington," he said, and his eyes were kind. "I'm so glad you came in today. I've been concerned about some irregularities in your account. Perhaps we should discuss this in my office?" I looked at him carefully. This was the man Wallace had trusted. The man who knew the signal. I reached across and very deliberately tapped my wedding ring 3 times against the handle of my purse. Raymond Chen's expression didn't change, but I saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition. Understanding. "Yes," he said smoothly. "I think a private conversation is definitely in order. Mrs. Washington, if you'll come with me, and perhaps your pastor and one friend. I'm afraid the rest will need to wait in the lobby, as will your son and daughter-in-law." "Now wait just a minute," Tyler started. "Sir, this is Mrs. Washington's account and her decision," Raymond said, his voice polite but firm. "If you'd like to open your own account, I'd be happy to help you with that afterward." The look on Tyler's face was worth everything. Pure rage mixed with fear. He knew something had gone wrong with his plan. He just didn't know what yet. I followed Raymond Chen into his office with Pastor Williams and Doris right behind me. As the door closed, I could hear Tyler arguing with Jessica in urgent, angry whispers. "Mrs. Washington," Raymond said once we were seated, "your husband was a good man and a valued client. He came to see me about 6 months before he passed. He wanted to make absolutely certain you would be protected if anyone, and he specifically mentioned your son, ever tried to take financial advantage of you. He set up several safeguards." "What kind of safeguards?" My voice shook. Raymond pulled out a file from his desk drawer. "First, any attempt to change the direct deposit accounts, add names to your accounts, or transfer power of attorney would trigger an immediate freeze and investigation. Second, he set up hidden cameras in the bank that I personally monitor. Every time you come in, I review the footage. If I see any signs of coercion or distress..." He paused meaningfully. "Such as your signal just now, I activate our financial abuse protocol, which I've just done." "What does that mean?" Pastor Williams asked. "It means all of Mrs. Washington's accounts are now frozen pending investigation. It means I've already contacted our fraud department about those forged checks. Yes, ma'am, we've been aware of them. We were building a case. It means the police will be arriving shortly. And it means," Raymond smiled slightly, "that there's one more thing your husband set up that your son has just activated." "What's that?" I whispered. A trust. A substantial trust that your husband built through careful investments and military benefits over 30 years. It's worth approximately $10 million. The room spun. 10 million? Yes, ma'am. Your husband was a very smart investor and a very careful planner. That trust was designed to provide for you for the rest of your life. But he added one special provision. If anyone ever attempted to financially abuse you or coerce you into signing over assets, the attempted abuse would automatically trigger a change in the trust's beneficiaries. I couldn't breathe. What kind of change? The trust would immediately be distributed to a list of charities your husband selected, veterans organizations, the church, community programs. The person who attempted the abuse would be legally barred from ever receiving anything from your estate. Through the glass walls of Raymond's office, I could see Tyler pacing in the lobby. Jessica was still on her phone, probably trying to figure out what was happening. They had no idea that in trying to steal my pension check, they'd just lost $10 million. There's more, Raymond said gently. The security cameras in the parking lot yesterday caught your son threatening you. We have video of him backing you against your car and pointing his finger in your face. We have audio of him saying that if you didn't cooperate, he'd have you declared incompetent. Pastor Williams made a sound of disgust. I've already sent that footage to the police as well, Raymond continued, along with documentation of the forged checks and the elder abuse. Mrs. Washington, I want you to know that you are completely protected. Your husband saw to that. I started crying then. Not sad tears, but something else. Relief. Gratitude. Love for a man who'd protected me even from beyond the grave. There's something else you should see, Raymond said. He pulled out an envelope. Your husband left this letter with me. He said I should give it to you if his safeguards were ever activated. My hands shook as I opened it. Wallace's handwriting filled the page. My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then someone has tried to hurt you, and I'm not there to stop them. I'm sorry for that. I'm sorry I had to leave you. But I need you to know that you are the strongest person I've ever known. You just don't always see it in yourself. I've watched you raise our son with endless love and patience. I've watched you hold our family together through deployments and nightmares and hard times. I've watched you turn our house into a home and our neighbors into family. You are the heartbeat of our community, Eleanor. Don't let anyone, not even our son, make you forget that. I set up these protections because I know Tyler. I've seen the entitlement growing in him, the way he measures worth in dollar signs instead of character. I hoped I was wrong. I prayed I was wrong. But if I wasn't, I wanted you to have every weapon you needed to defend yourself. You are not weak. You are not confused. You are not alone. Fight, Eleanor. Fight for yourself the way you've always fought for everyone else. I love you forever. Your Wallace. I pressed the letter to my chest and closed my eyes. Doris put her arm around me. Through the office window, I saw 2 police officers walking into the bank lobby. I saw Tyler's face as they approached him. I saw the exact moment he realized what was happening. He looked toward Raymond's office, and our eyes met through the glass. In that moment, I saw my little boy, the one who used to climb into bed with Wallace and me on Sunday mornings, who used to help me bake cookies for church, who used to cry when he scraped his knee and call for his mama. But that little boy was gone. The man standing in the lobby was a stranger who'd tried to steal my home, my money, and my dignity. The police officer said something to Tyler. Jessica started talking rapidly, her hands moving in agitated gestures. Tyler's face went from angry to pale to desperate. One of the officers pulled out handcuffs. Mrs. Washington, Raymond said gently, you don't have to watch this if you don't want to. But I did watch. I watched them cuff my son's hands behind his back. I watched Jessica's face crumble as they read Tyler his rights. I watched the other bank customers stare and whisper, I watched my son being led out of the bank in handcuffs, and I felt my heart break, even as I felt something like freedom flooding through my veins. "What happens now?" I asked Raymond. "Now, the police investigate the forged checks and the elder abuse. The district attorney decides whether to prosecute. Your accounts stay frozen for 24 hours while we complete our internal investigation. Then they'll be released back to your sole control with additional security measures. The trust will be distributed according to your husband's wishes. And you," he smiled at me, "you go home and rest. You've been through a trauma, Mrs. Washington. You've been violated by someone you should have been able to trust. That's not something you get over quickly." Pastor Williams stood. "Eleanor will have all the support she needs. Our church family will make sure of that." Doris squeezed my hand. "You're not alone, baby. You never were." As we walked out of the bank, I saw Tyler in the back of the police car. He was staring at me through the window, his face twisted with anger and something that might have been fear. I stopped walking. For just a moment, I stood there on the sidewalk looking at my son, and I sent up a prayer, not for his freedom, but for his soul. That somehow, somewhere down the line, he might understand what he'd done and find his way back to the person Wallace and I had tried to raise him to be. But I didn't say any of that out loud. I just turned away from the police car, linked arms with Doris and Pastor Williams, and walked to Doris's Buick with my head held high. We were pulling out of the parking lot when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. "Mrs. Washington?" An unfamiliar voice, female, young. "This is Officer Patricia Santos with the Fraud Division. I need to inform you that when we went to execute a search warrant at your son's residence, we discovered some additional evidence. It appears your son has been running a much larger operation than we initially thought." "What do you mean?" "Ma'am, we found documents suggesting he's been doing this to other elderly people, using his position at his company to gain access to their financial information and then forging checks. We're still sorting through it all, but it looks like there might be at least 5 other victims. We're going to need you to come down to the station to give a full statement." I closed my eyes and leaned my head against the car window. My son wasn't just a thief. He was a predator. "Mrs. Washington, are you still there?" "I'm here," I said. "I'll come to the station. Just tell me when." After I hung up, Doris looked at me in the rearview mirror. "What is it?" "There are other victims," I said quietly. "Other elderly people Tyler has been stealing from." Pastor Williams made a sound of pure disgust. "That boy's fall from grace is going to be biblical." We drove in silence for a while. Then my phone rang again. This time I recognized the number immediately. Jessica. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Eleanor." Jessica's voice was high and panicked. "You have to help us. The police are saying Tyler could go to prison for years. This is all a misunderstanding. He was just trying to help you manage your money. He never meant—" "Stop." My voice came out cold and hard. "Don't you dare call my house again. Don't come by. Don't contact me. If you or Tyler try to reach me, I'll get a restraining order. Do you understand?" "But we're family." "No," I said. "You're thieves." "There's a difference." I hung up and turned off my phone. When we got back to my house, there were 3 cars already parked in my driveway. Sister Margaret was on my porch with a casserole. Deacon Brown was there with his wife, holding grocery bags. Another church member was carrying fresh flowers. "We figured you might not feel like cooking tonight," Sister Margaret said as I walked up. "And we wanted to make sure you knew you were loved." I stood there on my porch looking at these people who'd known me for decades, who'd shown up without being asked because that's what family did. Real family. And I started crying again. This time, they were tears of gratitude. We all went inside, and they filled my kitchen with warmth and food and laughter and love. They told stories about Wallace, about the good times, about the way he used to make terrible jokes at church picnics and burn everything he tried to grill. They reminded me of who I was, not Tyler's victim, not a confused old woman, but Eleanor Washington, beloved wife, dedicated church member, friend. But later, after everyone had gone home and I was alone in my house again, I sat in Wallace's study, holding his letter and thinking about tomorrow. About the police station and the investigation and the news reporters who would probably show up once word got out about a local businessman arrested for elder abuse. I thought about the $10 million that would now go to charity instead of to Tyler. I thought about the other victims and wondered how many lives my son had destroyed in his greed. And I thought about the fact that Jessica still had the key to my house and knew my security code. That's when I heard it. A sound from the back door, the soft click of a key turning in a lock. Someone was in my house, and I knew exactly who it was. I grabbed the phone with one hand and Wallace's letter opener from his desk with the other. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The back door creaked open slowly, like someone was trying to be quiet. "I know you're in there, Mrs. Eleanor." Jessica's voice echoed through my house, but it sounded different now, harder, meaner. "We need to talk about what you did to my husband." I moved as quietly as I could toward the hallway, staying close to the wall. My cell phone was still off in my purse in the living room. The landline in Wallace's study only had enough cord to reach the doorway. "You ruined everything!" Jessica's footsteps were getting closer. She was in the kitchen now. I could hear her opening drawers, closing them, looking for something. "Do you know how much money you just cost us? Do you have any idea?" I pressed myself against the wall in the hallway, barely breathing. Through the crack in the study door, I could see her shadow moving in the kitchen. She was holding something metal that caught the light. $10 million, Mrs. Eleanor. That money was supposed to be ours. Tyler worked for it. He took care of you after his daddy died. He deserved that inheritance. She moved into the living room. I could see her now through the hallway. She had a crowbar in her hand and my purse in the other. She was dumping everything out. My wallet, my keys, my phone. "Where are they?" she hissed, throwing my purse down. "Where are the documents? The real will? I know you have them somewhere." That's when I noticed something that made my blood freeze. Jessica's left hand, the one holding the crowbar, had a tattoo on the wrist. A small number. It looked like a prison identification number. "I spent 3 years planning this," Jessica said, moving toward the hallway, toward me. 3 years getting close to Tyler, convincing him to marry me, working my way into this family. Do you think I did all that just to watch you give away $10 million to charity? She wasn't just Tyler's greedy wife. She was something worse, something that had targeted my family specifically. I didn't have time to think. I just moved. I burst out of the study and ran for the front door. Jessica screamed and lunged after me, but I was faster than she expected. 70 years old, but terror gave me speed I didn't know I still had. I got the front door open just as she grabbed the back of my dress. The fabric tore with a loud rip, but I pulled free and stumbled out onto the porch. Sister Margaret's casserole dish was still on the steps where she'd left it earlier. I grabbed it without thinking and threw it behind me. It shattered against Jessica's shoulder, covering her in green bean casserole and broken glass. She screamed in pain and rage. I ran down my porch steps and into the yard. Deacon Brown lived 3 houses down. If I could just get there. Jessica caught up to me at the end of my driveway. She tackled me from behind, and we both went down hard on the concrete. Pain exploded through my shoulder and hip where I hit the ground. The letter opener flew from my hand and skittered across the driveway. "You stupid old woman!" Jessica panted, pinning me down. She was younger and stronger, and her knee was digging into my back. "You should have just signed over the money. Now I have to do this the hard way." "Get off my neighbor!" Deacon Brown's voice boomed through the night. I heard his footsteps running toward us. Jessica jumped up and ran, disappearing into the darkness between the houses. Deacon Brown knelt beside me, his face full of concern. "Eleanor, are you hurt? I heard screaming." "Call 911, I gasped. Jessica broke into my house. She tried to... I couldn't finish. The pain in my shoulder was getting worse. "Don't move," Deacon Brown said. He pulled out his phone and called for help while his wife came running from their house with a blanket. The ambulance arrived at the same time as the police. They put me on a stretcher and I tried to protest, but the paramedic, a kind young woman with gentle hands, told me my shoulder might be dislocated and I needed to go to the hospital. "I need to tell the police," I said. "Jessica, there's something wrong with her. She has a prison tattoo. This wasn't just about money. She planned this." Officer Santos, the same one who'd called me earlier, was suddenly there beside the ambulance. "Mrs. Washington, what did you say about a tattoo?" "On her left wrist, numbers, like the ones they give prisoners." Officer Santos's face went pale. "Describe her to me. Everything you remember." I did, even though my shoulder hurt so bad I wanted to cry. The blonde hair, the red nails, the designer purse, the cold eyes, the tattoo. "Oh, God," Officer Santos said. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. "Is this her?" The woman in the photo looked different, darker hair, no makeup, wearing an orange jumpsuit. But the eyes were the same, those cold, calculating eyes. "Yes, that's Jessica. Who is she?" "Her real name is Jennifer Hawkins. She's a con artist who specializes in targeting families with elderly members and hidden assets. She's wanted in 4 states for fraud, identity theft, and—" Officer Santos hesitated. "And 1 count of attempted murder, of an elderly man in Florida whose family she infiltrated." The world spun around me. My son hadn't just married a gold digger. He'd married a criminal who'd been using him to get to my family's money. "She said she spent 3 years planning this," I told Officer Santos. "She knew about the 10 million. How could she know? Tyler didn't even know." "These people do their research. They look for obituaries of military veterans, check property records, search for families with assets. If your husband had a military pension and owned property free and clear, you'd be exactly the kind of target she looks for." They loaded me into the ambulance. Officer Santos promised she'd meet me at the hospital to get a full statement. As we pulled away, I saw more police cars arriving. Lights were flashing all up and down my quiet street. Neighbors were coming out of their houses. Everything was falling apart. At the hospital, they confirmed my shoulder was dislocated, and I had bruising along my ribs and back. A doctor, young with kind eyes, reset my shoulder, and the pain was so intense I nearly passed out. They gave me medication and put my arm in a sling and said I needed to stay overnight for observation. That's when Pastor Williams arrived with half the church council. Sister Margaret was crying. Deacon Brown looked ready to hunt Jessica down himself. "The police are searching your house," Pastor Williams told me gently. "They said Jessica destroyed some things looking for documents. I'm sorry, Eleanor." My house. The home Wallace and I built together. Violated twice in one day. First by my son's betrayal, now by his wife's violence. "There's something else," Officer Santos said, arriving with another officer I didn't recognize. "We found evidence at Tyler's house that Jessica, or Jennifer, her real name, has been communicating with someone else. Someone who's been feeding her information about your family's finances. We're tracking down the IP address now, but it looks like she had help from inside your bank." "Inside the bank?" My voice came out weak. "But Raymond Chen was Wallace's friend. He would never—" "Not Mr. Chen," Officer Santos said. "Someone else, a teller who had access to account information. We're bringing her in for questioning now." Everything kept getting worse. It wasn't just Tyler and Jessica. There were more people involved. More betrayal. More violation. "We also found something in Tyler's computer that you need to know about," Officer Santos continued. She looked uncomfortable. "He's been in contact with a lawyer about having you declared incompetent for the past 6 months. They were building a case using edited videos that made it look like you were confused and forgetful. Jessica would ask you questions and then cut the video to make your answers seem incoherent." 6 months, I whispered. He was planning this for 6 months. Actually, the other officer said, we think it was longer. We found receipts showing that Jessica first made contact with Tyler 3 years ago at a veterans fundraiser. She targeted him specifically because she'd researched your family. She knew about the pension, the property, everything. 3 years. My son had been manipulated for 3 years, turned into a thief and an abuser by a woman who saw us as nothing more than marks. I started crying. Not gentle tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that hurt my injured shoulder and made the machines beep in alarm. The nurse came in and said everyone needed to leave except one person. Pastor Williams stayed, holding my good hand while I cried myself into exhausted sleep. I woke up at dawn with my whole body aching. Pastor Williams was asleep in the chair beside my bed. There was a police officer stationed outside my door. Protection, they said, in case Jessica tried to come back. A different doctor came in to check on me, older this time, with gray hair and a familiar face. It took me a moment to place her, and then I remembered. Dr. Sheila Okonkwo. She'd been at Wallace's funeral. "Mrs. Washington," she said gently, "how are you feeling?" "Like my son tried to destroy me and his wife tried to kill me," I said, my voice rough from crying. Dr. Okonkwo nodded. "I heard what happened. I need you to know something. 3 weeks ago, Dr. Harrison, Tyler's friend, called me asking questions about your mental competency. He wanted me to sign a form saying you were experiencing cognitive decline. I refused." My heart started beating faster. "Why did you refuse?" "Because I've known you for 15 years. You're sharp as a tack. Always have been. And because—" She hesitated. "Because Dr. Harrison offered me money to sign the form. $5,000. That's when I knew something was very wrong. I reported it to the medical board, but I didn't know who to tell in your family. I should have called you directly. I'm sorry." "He tried to bribe you?" "Yes. And I wasn't the first doctor he approached. We've since learned he tried 3 other physicians who knew you. One of them signed the form. We're investigating him now for medical fraud." Everything was unraveling. Every piece of the conspiracy was coming to light. Officer Santos came back later that morning with news. "We've arrested the bank teller. Her name is Monica Price. She's been feeding Jessica information about various clients' accounts for the past 2 years. In exchange, Jessica was giving her a percentage of whatever she could steal. We're estimating they've defrauded at least 15 people out of over $2 million. 15 people, I repeated numbly. Yes, ma'am. And here's the thing. Jessica's been doing this for almost a decade. She finds a vulnerable man with family money, gets close to him, manipulates him into helping her steal from his relatives, and then disappears before anyone can catch her. Tyler isn't her first victim. He's her 5th that we know of." "Where is Tyler?" I asked quietly. "Still in custody. He's been formally charged with forgery, theft, and elder abuse. His lawyer is trying to argue that Jessica manipulated him, that he's a victim too. And honestly, Mrs. Washington, there might be some truth to that. We found evidence that she was drugging his coffee with small amounts of prescription medications that would make him more suggestible. But that doesn't excuse what he did to you." "No, it didn't excuse it. My son had stolen from me, had threatened me, had tried to have me declared incompetent. Maybe Jessica had manipulated him, but he'd made choices. Bad choices. Evil choices. They discharged me from the hospital that afternoon. Pastor Williams drove me home, and I wasn't prepared for what I saw." My front door had been broken down by the police when they'd searched for Jessica. The back door was hanging open. Inside, my house looked like a tornado had hit it. Drawers were pulled out and dumped. Pictures were torn off walls. Wallace's study was the worst. Every drawer opened, every file scattered, his chair overturned. Sister Margaret and Doris were already there with a cleaning crew from the church. They'd boarded up the broken doors and were putting everything back together. "Oh, baby," Doris said when she saw my face. "Don't look at the damage. Look at what we're fixing. Your house will be beautiful again." But it wasn't just the physical damage, it was the violation of it. The knowledge that Jessica had torn through my life looking for money, destroying memories and keepsakes like they were nothing. I walked through the rooms in a daze. In my bedroom, she'd dumped out my jewelry box. Wallace's dog tags, the ones he wore in Vietnam, were tangled in a mess of costume jewelry on the floor. I picked them up with my good hand and held them to my chest. "We're going to install a security system," Deacon Brown said. "Cameras, motion sensors, the works. And you're not staying here alone until Jessica is caught." "I'll stay with her," Sister Margaret said firmly. "My guest room is always ready." "Actually," Pastor Williams said, "we've arranged something else. The church has a small apartment connected to the office building. It's furnished and private. We thought Eleanor might feel safer there for a while, closer to the community." I nodded, too tired to argue, too broken to care where I slept. That's when my phone rang. It was Raymond Chen from the bank. "Mrs. Washington, I'm so sorry to bother you after everything you've been through. But I thought you should know. We've completed our investigation. The trust funds are secure. Jessica and Monica never actually accessed them. Your husband's protections worked perfectly. The $10 million is safe." "It's going to charity," I said dully. "Tyler's attempt to steal from me activated the clause." "Actually," Raymond said slowly, "there's something else in the trust documents that I don't think you knew about. A second clause. If the attempted theft was done under duress or manipulation, if your family member was coerced by a third party, the trust doesn't automatically go to charity. Instead, it triggers a waiting period. A sort of grace period." "What do you mean?" "I mean that if Tyler can prove he was manipulated by Jessica, if he cooperates fully with the investigation and makes restitution for what he stole, the trust could still pass to your heirs. Your husband built in a forgiveness clause, Mrs. Washington. One last chance for redemption." I sat down hard on my bed. Even in death, Wallace was trying to save our son. "There's more," Raymond continued. "We found something else in your husband's safety deposit box. A letter addressed to Tyler. I think Wallace suspected this might happen. That greed or manipulation might turn Tyler against you. He wanted his son to have the chance to make it right." "Can I see the letter?" "It's addressed to Tyler, but if you give permission, I can deliver it to him at the jail." I closed my eyes. My son had betrayed me, had stolen from me, had stood by while his wife tried to hurt me. Every instinct told me to let him face the full consequences of his actions, but he was still my son, still the baby boy who used to climb into bed with Wallace and me on Sunday mornings. "Deliver the letter," I said quietly. That evening, the church held an emergency meeting. Over 100 people showed up, members who'd known Wallace and me for decades, people we'd helped through hard times, families whose children Wallace had mentored. Pastor Williams stood at the front of the sanctuary and told them everything. About Tyler's theft, Jessica's con, the violence, the conspiracy, about the 15 other victims and the millions of dollars stolen, about the trust and Wallace's protections and the choice I now had to make. When he finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then Sister Margaret stood up. "Eleanor Washington has given her whole life to this community. She's cooked meals for sick families, babysat children, donated to every fundraiser, volunteered for every event. When my husband died, Eleanor sat with me every single night for a month. She held my hand through the darkness." Others started standing, sharing stories, times I'd helped them, blessed them, loved them. "We need to do more than just support Eleanor," Deacon Brown said. "We need to help those other victims. The people Jessica and Tyler and that bank teller stole from. We need to make this right." "I propose we start a victims fund," Pastor Williams said. "Use church resources to provide legal help and support for everyone affected by this conspiracy. Show them the same love we're showing Eleanor." The vote was unanimous. Then someone in the back stood up. A young woman I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Washington doesn't know me," she said, her voice shaking. "But I know her story because I'm one of the victims. Jessica pretended to be my grandson's girlfriend. She stole $40,000 from me before disappearing. I've been too ashamed to tell anyone. But seeing Mrs. Washington's courage in speaking up, it gave me courage too." Another person stood, an elderly man. "She got me for $30,000. Claimed she needed it for medical bills for her sick mother." Then another, and another. 5 people in that church that night had been victimized by Jessica and her network. 5 people who'd suffered in silence until now. By the end of the meeting, we had the names and contact information of all the victims. We had a plan to provide legal representation and support. We had a community united in fighting back against the people who'd preyed on our elderly members. I stood at the front of the church, my arm in a sling and my body aching, and felt something strange happening inside my chest. The grief and betrayal were still there. The pain was still real. But something else was growing too. Purpose, determination, strength. Wallace had protected me, but he'd also prepared me, given me the tools to fight back. And now I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every elderly person Jessica had victimized, every family she'd torn apart. "Thank you," I said to the assembled church. "All of you, for reminding me who I am, for showing me I'm not alone." That night, sleeping in the church apartment, I got a call from Officer Santos. "We found her," she said. "Jessica tried to flee to Mexico, but we caught her at the border. She's in custody now. She'll be extradited back here to face charges." Relief flooded through me. Thank God. There's something else. When we arrested her, she was carrying documents. Detailed plans for her next target. An 80-year-old widower in Dallas with oil money. She was already working on him, already getting close. But we stopped her in time. Another life saved. Another family protected. "We also found her communications with Tyler," Officer Santos continued. "Text messages, emails, recordings of their conversations. Mrs. Washington, I think you need to prepare yourself. The evidence suggests Tyler knew more than he initially claimed. He wasn't completely manipulated. He was a willing participant in at least some of the fraud. My son, my baby boy, a willing criminal. But," Officer Santos said carefully, "he's been talking, cooperating, giving us information about Jessica's network. He led us to 2 more people who were helping her, a lawyer who would forge documents, and a private investigator who would research potential targets. He's trying to make amends." "Is it enough?" I asked. "That's not for me to say, ma'am. That's for the courts, and for you." After I hung up, I lay in the unfamiliar bed staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow I'd have to go back to my damaged house, face the insurance claims and the repairs and the memories of violence. Tomorrow I'd have to decide whether to visit my son in jail, whether to read Wallace's letter to him, whether to offer him the grace period the trust allowed. Tomorrow I'd have to figure out how to move forward in a life that had been torn apart in less than 48 hours. But tonight, I just closed my eyes and prayed. For strength, for wisdom, for the ability to forgive without forgetting, and for my son's soul, wherever it had gone. My phone buzzed one more time, a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Tyler's lawyer. He needs to see you. He has information about someone else involved, someone bigger than Jessica, someone who's been orchestrating all of this from the beginning. Please, Mrs. Washington, it's urgent." I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Someone bigger than Jessica? Someone who'd been orchestrating everything? The conspiracy wasn't over. It was just beginning. I didn't sleep that night. At 5 a.m, I was already dressed and waiting when Officer Santos arrived to take me to the jail. My shoulders still ached, but I needed answers more than I needed rest. Tyler looked terrible. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his face unshaven, his eyes red and swollen. When they brought him into the visiting room, he couldn't even look at me. "Mama," he whispered. I'm so sorry. Tell me about the person orchestrating this. I cut him off. My voice was cold. Your lawyer said someone bigger than Jessica was pulling the strings. Tyler's hands shook as he leaned forward. I didn't know until yesterday. Jessica told me everything when she realized the police were closing in. She thought if she gave me enough information, I'd help her escape. He finally looked up at me, and I saw real fear in his eyes. Mama, it's someone you trust. Someone who's been in our lives for years. Who? Do you remember when Dad first set up his accounts at First National Bank? About 15 years ago? I nodded slowly. Wallace had switched banks after our old one got bought out by a national chain. He wanted somewhere local, somewhere personal. Dad was assigned an account manager, a woman who helped him with investments and planning. She was always so nice, always asking about the family. Her name was Vivian Price. My blood went cold. Price? Like Monica Price, the bank teller? Her mother, Tyler said. Monica wasn't just some random employee Jessica corrupted. Vivian recruited Jessica specifically to target our family. She's been planning this for over a decade. But why? What did Wallace ever do to her? Tyler's face crumpled. It goes back to Vietnam. Dad served with Vivian's father, Raymond Price. There was an incident during the war, an attack on their unit. Raymond died, and Vivian's family always believed Dad could have saved him, but didn't. They blamed him for Raymond's death. The room spun around me. Raymond Price. I'd heard that name before. Wallace used to wake up screaming it sometimes, in the early years of our marriage. He'd told me once about a soldier who'd died in his arms, a friend he couldn't save no matter how hard he tried. Vivian has been stealing from Dad's accounts in tiny amounts for years, Tyler continued. Small enough that it looked like normal fees and expenses. She took almost $1 million over 15 years. Then when Dad died, she realized the big money was coming, the trust, the pension going to you. That's when she brought in Jessica to manipulate me into helping steal everything. And you just went along with it? My voice broke. You let them turn you into a thief? No, I mean... Tyler wiped his eyes. Jessica started drugging my coffee 6 months ago. The police found the evidence. Some kind of medication that made me paranoid and suggestible. She convinced me you were losing your mind, that you'd waste all of Dad's money, that I needed to protect our family's legacy. I know it sounds insane now, but at the time, it all made perfect sense. I wanted to believe him. God help me, part of me wanted to believe my son was a victim too, but I'd seen the cold calculation in his eyes when he demanded my pension check. The drugs might have made it easier, but the greed was already there. Vivian is still at the bank, Tyler said urgently. She doesn't know we've figured out her connection. She thinks she's safe because Monica took the fall. But Mama, she's planning something else. I heard Jessica on the phone with her the night before everything fell apart. Vivian said if the bank plan failed, she had a backup. Something about the trust documents themselves being fraudulent. My heart stopped. What? I don't know the details. But you need to tell Raymond Chen. Tell the police. Vivian Price has access to all of Dad's original paperwork. If she can prove the trust was set up incorrectly, if she can get it invalidated somehow, she could still steal everything, I finished. Officer Santos was already on her phone before Tyler finished talking. Within 20 minutes, police were descending on First National Bank. Raymond Chen was escorted to safety while they searched Vivian Price's office. What they found made national news. Vivian had been running the biggest bank fraud scheme in the state's history. Over 20 years, she'd systematically stolen from hundreds of clients, mostly elderly veterans and their widows. She'd target families with military pensions and hidden assets, skim money through fake fees, and when clients got suspicious, she'd either transfer them to other account managers or, in at least 3 cases that we knew of, have them declared incompetent so she could take over their finances completely. The documents in her office showed she'd stolen over $30 million. And she'd forged papers claiming Wallace's trust was invalid due to a missing signature on the original filing, papers she was planning to submit to the court the very day the police arrested her. When they brought Vivian in, she was calm, almost smiling. A tiny woman in her 60s with gray hair and reading glasses, she looked like somebody's sweet grandmother, right up until Officer Santos showed her the evidence. "That money should have been my family's," Vivian said, her voice venomous. "Raymond Price saved Wallace Washington's life in Vietnam, threw himself on a grenade to protect his unit. Wallace got to come home, get married, have a family, build a life. My father got a folded flag and a widow with 3 children to raise alone. Where's the justice in that?" "Your father was a hero," Officer Santos said quietly. "But that doesn't give you the right to steal from his comrades' families." "Wallace Washington was a coward!" Vivian screamed, her calm facade finally cracking. "He should have died that day, not my father. Every dollar I took was payment for my father's sacrifice." "Your father would be ashamed of you," I said from the doorway. Everyone turned to look at me. I wasn't supposed to be in the interrogation room, but Officer Santos had allowed it. I needed to face this woman, needed her to see what she'd done to real people, not just bank accounts. "You never knew your father," I continued, walking slowly into the room. "Wallace did. He told me about Raymond Price, about how brave he was, how kind, how he used to share his rations with the local children and carry pictures of his daughters everywhere. Raymond saved Wallace's life because that's who he was, a hero, a protector, and you dishonored his memory by becoming a thief and a monster." Vivian's face turned purple with rage. "You know nothing about my father." "I know Wallace carried the guilt of Raymond's death for 50 years. I know he donated money every month to veterans organizations in Raymond's name. I know he tried to find your family after the war to help support you, but your mother had moved and changed her name. He never stopped looking." That was true. I'd found the letters in Wallace's study, decades of correspondence with military registries, trying to track down Raymond Price's family, trying to make amends for surviving when his friend didn't. "Liar," Vivian whispered, but her voice shook. "The proof is in my husband's study. Letters, donation receipts. Everything. Raymond Chen has copies at the bank, too. Wallace set up a scholarship fund in your father's name for children of veterans killed in action. It's given out over $2 million in the last 30 years. Vivian's face went white. She'd spent 2 decades stealing from the man who'd honored her father's memory more than she ever had. The trial started 6 weeks later. The prosecutor charged Vivian Price with bank fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and elder abuse affecting over 200 victims. Jessica Hawkins faced charges of fraud, conspiracy, assault, and attempted murder. Monica Price got a plea deal for testifying against her mother. Tyler was charged separately, and his trial was scheduled for 2 months later. Dr. Harrison lost his medical license and faced charges of bribery and fraud. The lawyer and private investigator who'd helped Jessica both took plea deals. The courtroom was packed every single day. Victims filled the gallery, elderly people who'd lost life savings, families torn apart by financial stress, children who'd watched their parents struggle because Vivian had stolen their inheritance. I testified on the 3rd day. My lawyer, provided free by the church's victim fund, walked me through everything. The threats, the forged checks, Jessica's attack, the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed my family. "Mrs. Washington," the defense attorney said during cross-examination, "isn't it true that your son was simply trying to help you manage your finances? That your grief over your husband's death had made you irrational?" I looked at Tyler sitting at the defense table. He couldn't meet my eyes. "My son tried to steal my home," I said clearly. "He forged my signature 50 times. He conspired with criminals to have me declared incompetent. Whether he was manipulated or not, those are the facts. I'm not irrational. I'm heartbroken." The defense attorney tried again. But you're willing to let him access the trust if he makes restitution, correct? Doesn't that suggest you believe he was manipulated? It suggests I'm his mother, I said. It suggests I believe in redemption and second chances. But it doesn't excuse what he did. Jessica's trial was even more dramatic. She represented herself, a terrible decision, and used the courtroom as a stage. She was beautiful and articulate and completely unrepentant. These people had more money than they needed, she told the jury. They were hoarding wealth while others struggled. I simply redistributed it. You attacked a 70-year-old woman in her own driveway, the prosecutor said. She was trying to keep $10 million from people who actually needed it, Jessica shot back, including her own son. You drugged her son and manipulated him into committing crimes. I helped him see the truth about his selfish mother. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours, guilty on all counts. Vivian's trial lasted longer. 2 full weeks of testimony from victims, bank employees, fraud experts. Raymond Chen testified about how Vivian had manipulated the bank's systems for years, hiding her theft behind legitimate-looking transactions. The victims' impact statements took an entire day. One after another, elderly people stood up and described how Vivian's theft had destroyed their lives. One woman had lost her home. A man couldn't afford his wife's cancer treatment. A couple in their 80s was living in their car because Vivian had drained their retirement account. When it was my turn, I stood at the podium and looked directly at Vivian. You told yourself you were honoring your father's memory, I said. But Raymond Price died protecting people. You made your life's work hurting them. You became the opposite of everything he stood for. And the saddest part is, if you'd come to my husband honestly, if you'd told him who you were, he would have helped you. He would have shared everything he had. Because that's who Wallace was. That's who your father's sacrifice created. Vivian started crying. Real tears this time, not the manipulative ones she'd shown before. She finally understood what she'd lost. What she'd thrown away for money. The jury found her guilty on every single count. At sentencing, the judge was harsh. Jessica got 35 years. Vivian got 40. Monica got 15 with the possibility of parole. The lawyer and private investigator each got 10 years. Dr. Harrison lost his license permanently and got 5 years for the fraud charges. And Tyler, my son, my baby boy, stood before a judge 4 months after everything began and faced his reckoning. His lawyer presented evidence of the drugging, the manipulation, Jessica's control over him. Character witnesses from his job testified that he'd always been honest before meeting Jessica. His therapist explained how trauma and grief had made him vulnerable. But the prosecutor showed the forged checks, played recordings of Tyler threatening me, presented evidence that he'd known some of what Jessica was doing and had chosen to participate anyway. Mr. Washington, the judge said, you were a victim of manipulation. But you were also a perpetrator of elder abuse against your own mother. Those 2 things can both be true. The question is, what happens now? She sentenced him to 5 years, with 3 years suspended. 2 years in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. Full restitution to me and the other victims he'd helped defraud. And mandatory counseling. It was both more and less than I'd expected. Part of me wanted him to face the full consequences. Part of me just wanted my son back. After the sentencing, Tyler was allowed a few minutes with me before they took him away. We sat in a small room with a guard at the door. Mama, Tyler said, his voice breaking, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be the man Dad raised me to be. The man you believed I was. I looked at my son in his prison jumpsuit and saw the little boy who used to climb into bed with Wallace and me on Sunday mornings, the teenager who'd helped me bake cookies for church, the young man who'd cried at his father's funeral. He was still in there somewhere, buried under greed and selfishness and bad choices, but still there. "Wallace left you a letter," I said quietly. "Raymond Chen has it. I'm going to ask him to give it to you while you're in prison. Maybe it will help you find your way back." "What does it say?" "I don't know. It's addressed to you, but knowing your father, it's probably about second chances, about redemption, about becoming the man you were meant to be." Tyler nodded, tears streaming down his face. "Will you visit me?" I thought about that question for a long time, about what it meant to be a mother, to love someone who'd hurt you, to believe in redemption while still demanding accountability. "Maybe," I said finally. "After a while, when you've had time to think about what you've done, when you're ready to really face it." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was possibility, and sometimes possibility is all you can offer. The guard came to take Tyler away. I watched him go and felt something shift inside my chest. The grief was still there, the betrayal still hurt, but I was healing. Slowly, painfully, but healing. 6 months after the trials ended, the church held a special service. All of Vivian's victims were invited, along with their families and supporters. Over 500 people packed into Mount Zion Baptist Church that Sunday morning. Pastor Williams stood at the pulpit and spoke about justice and healing, about how a community comes together in crisis, about the strength it takes to stand up and say no more. Then he called me to the front. "Eleanor Washington could have hidden after what happened to her," Pastor Williams said. "She could have been ashamed, withdrawn, afraid. Instead, she stood up. She spoke out. She helped us find and support over 50 other victims. She turned her pain into purpose." The congregation erupted in applause. I stood there in my navy dress, the same one I'd worn to the bank that day, and looked out at all those faces, people who'd supported me, believed me, fought alongside me. "We've established the Raymond Price Veterans Family Fund," Pastor Williams continued, using the scholarship money Wallace had already donated, combined with restitution payments from the criminals and donations from the community. "It will help veterans' families who've been victims of financial crimes. It will provide counseling, legal support, and emergency assistance." More applause. Sister Margaret was crying. Doris was beaming. "And," Pastor Williams said, "Eleanor has something to announce." I took the microphone with shaking hands. "The trust my husband set up, the $10 million, it's not going to charity after all. Tyler is working to meet the requirements of the grace period. He's making restitution, cooperating with investigators, trying to make amends. If he completes all the requirements, the trust will eventually pass to my other heirs." There was some murmuring in the crowd. People weren't sure how to feel about Tyler getting another chance. "But," I continued, "I've spoken with the trustee. I'm using my authority to redirect 75% of the trust immediately to the victims' fund, $7.5 million to help heal the damage Vivian and her network caused. The rest will stay in trust for my grandchildren's education, grandchildren who are innocent victims of their father's crimes and deserve a chance at a better future." The church erupted. People were standing, clapping, crying. I saw the other victims in the crowd, their faces transformed by hope and gratitude. "My husband Wallace protected me," I said when the noise died down. "But more than that, he taught me that strength isn't about how much you can take, it's about how you respond when someone tries to break you. It's about standing up not just for yourself, but for everyone who can't stand up alone." After the service, people lined up to thank me, hug me, share their own stories of survival. One woman, the one who'd testified at trial about losing her home, told me the fund had helped her find an apartment and get back on her feet. A man whose wife's cancer treatment had been delayed because of Vivian's theft said the fund had covered their remaining medical bills. A couple in their 80s who'd been living in their car were now in a safe senior housing facility, funded partly by the Victims Fund. One by one, lives were being rebuilt. As the crowd finally thinned out, I sat in a pew and looked around the empty church. This was where Wallace and I had gotten married 50 years ago, where we'd raised Tyler, where we'd celebrated and mourned and built our life. Doris sat down beside me. "You did good, Eleanor. Really good." "I just did what needed to be done." "No," Doris said firmly. "You did what was right, even when it was hard, even when it hurt. That's what makes you special." I thought about everything that had happened: the betrayal, the violence, the trials, the healing. 6 months that had turned my entire life upside down. "Wallace knew," I said quietly. "Somehow he knew this might happen, and he gave me the tools to fight back." "Wallace gave you tools," Doris agreed. "But Eleanor, you had the strength all along. He just helped you see it." That night, I went home to my house, repaired now, with new doors and windows and a state-of-the-art security system. The church community had helped restore everything Jessica had damaged. My wedding photos were back on the walls. Wallace's study was organized and peaceful. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in Wallace's chair, looking at the photograph of him in his military uniform. So young, so brave, so full of hope for the future we'd build together. "I miss you," I whispered to the photograph. "Every single day. But I'm okay. I'm going to be okay." My phone buzzed. A text from Officer Santos. "Thought you'd want to know. We tracked down 3 more of Jessica's potential victims using the information from her files. Stopped her plans before she could hurt anyone else. You saved lives, Mrs. Washington." I saved lives. Me, Eleanor Washington, 70-year-old widow who 6 months ago had been standing in her kitchen being threatened by her own son. I wasn't the same woman anymore. That woman had been broken by betrayal. This woman had been forged in fire and come out stronger. There was a knock at my door. Through the new security camera, I could see Raymond Chen standing on my porch holding a folder. "Mr. Chen," I said, opening the door. "What brings you here so late?" "I thought you should see this in person," he said, coming inside. "It's from the trust investigation. We found some additional documents your husband left. Instructions he wanted carried out after all the legal matters were settled." I took the folder with trembling hands. Inside was a letter in Wallace's handwriting. "My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, then you've survived the storm. You've faced down whoever tried to hurt you, and you've won. I knew you would. You've always been stronger than you believed. I have one final request. Use the trust money to help others. Build something lasting. Turn this pain into something beautiful. That's what you do, Eleanor. You take broken things and make them whole. You take hurt and turn it into healing. I've been gone for a while by now. I hope the missing gets easier. I hope you're finding joy again. I hope you remember that our love didn't end when I died. It just changed form. I'm still with you. In every act of kindness you show, every person you help, every time you choose courage over fear. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. Being your husband was the greatest honor of my life. Build something beautiful, my love, and know that wherever I am, I'm proud of you. Forever yours, Wallace." I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Then I looked up at Raymond Chen. "He knew," I said. "Everything that would happen, everything I would do. He knew." "He knew you," Raymond corrected gently. "He knew the woman you are, the woman you've always been." After Raymond left, I sat in my living room holding Wallace's letter and thinking about everything that had happened. About the $7.5 million that would help victims rebuild their lives. About Tyler in prison, working toward redemption. About Jessica and Vivian and all the others facing justice for their crimes. About the community that had rallied around me. The friends who'd never let me face this alone. The strangers who'd become allies in the fight against elder abuse. I thought about the woman I was 6 months ago, grieving, vulnerable, alone. And the woman I was now, strong, purposeful, surrounded by love. Wallace had protected me. But more importantly, he'd believed in me. Believed I had the strength to protect myself, to fight back, to win. And he'd been right. I walked to my kitchen and looked at the spot where Tyler had stood when he demanded my pension check. The spot where everything had started to fall apart. Or maybe where everything had started to come together. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from the victim's fund coordinator. 3 more families reached out today asking for help. The word is spreading. We're making a real difference. A real difference. That's what Wallace had wanted. That's what I was building from the ashes of betrayal. I looked at my wedding ring, the simple gold band I'd tapped 3 times against my purse that day in the bank. The signal that had activated all of Wallace's protections. The signal that had saved my life. 3 taps. Such a small thing. But it had changed everything. I tapped my ring 3 times against the kitchen counter. Once for the past, once for the present, once for the future. A reminder that I was still here, still fighting, still strong. My son had tried to destroy me. His wife had tried to kill me. A decades-long conspiracy had tried to steal everything Wallace and I had built. But I was Eleanor Washington, wife of a Vietnam veteran, mother, friend, survivor, and I was just getting started. Thank you for staying with us through this journey. Please subscribe for more stories and drop a comment. We read every single one.